This whole thing happened 3 years ago. About 2 weeks before Christmas, I was a 15-year-old with 2 sisters. Julie was 1 year older than me, and Mila was 13. One night at around 11:30 p.m. during Christmas break, I was sitting in my mom's room just talking to my sisters, and of course, sitting together to talk is a usual thing for us as we are wrapping up our conversations and saying our good nights. Suddenly, my sister Julie said she forgot to bring back the new Christmas music CD in our room, which she and Mom bought from the store. She asks Malu and me to go outside to get those. I grabbed Mom's car keys and headed outside. I got to our front gate and waved for Malu to come with me. She then said she didn't want to help me with carrying because it was cold outside. Screw it, I walked my happy self down the driveway into my mom's vehicle. As I was walking down the street, I saw a black figure standing in the middle of the street. I brush it off and just tell myself that the person is probably walking through to get somewhere. I grabbed those CDs, but out of the corner of my eye, I could still see the person standing still. As I closed the trunk and locked the car, I saw him turn his head to stare at me. I was so creeped out that I ran up my driveway, slammed the gate, went into my house, and locked the doors. I told my mom about the guy, and she called my dad to ask him to see who was out there. My dad came home about an hour later. Evidently, the same person was still standing there and didn't leave until after he asked him if he needed something. 2 days later, my grandma asked me to greet and invite the Christmas party in our house to our new neighbor's house. For a reason completely unrelated, I'm in my comfy slippers, so I asked Malu and Julie to do it. They agreed to go, but only if I stood outside the gate and watched them. The girls walked over to his front door and knocked. He didn't answer, so they stood there waiting for a couple of minutes before they tried again. I noticed that after they knocked the first time, the guy I had seen standing in the middle of the street 2 nights before was walking up the street again. I got an eerie feeling, and I was hoping that the neighbor would hurry. He was 2 houses away when she finally answered the door. The girl said goodbye to our neighbor and proceeded to walk back to our house. They were just getting to the end of the lady's long driveway when the man was at the starting point of it. He was 10 steps away from the girls now, and he just started laughing, just this gross cackle of a laugh. The girls get creeped out obviously and start to run and walk up the driveway. He picks up his pace and notices me standing at the gate waiting for them. He looks me in the eye, bites his lip, and starts whistling some creepy-ass tune. By now, the girls are inside the gate, and the man starts walking up our driveway, still whistling. I shake my head, no, and he laughs again. He's about halfway up the driveway when my dad comes out. My dad hadn't taken notice of him yet, but the creeper sure saw him. He looked me straight in the eyes with this smirk on his face and said, "You got lucky this time." He walks towards the sidewalk on the opposite side of my house and continues whistling. Of course, I told my dad about what happened right then and there. He was furious at this guy. He tried looking for him but couldn't find him after he ran. Later on that night, my dad saw the man walking down our street once again. My dad approaches him and asks him what he's doing. The guy then smirks at my dad and just walks away. My father reported the man to the police, but unfortunately, when the police got there, the guy was long gone. The next day, my sisters and I saw about 5 police cars at another one of our neighboring houses. We questioned it and told our dad about it because he was good friends with those neighbors. About an hour later, the police showed up at our door. They were there to talk to us about the same man standing in the middle of the street walking up my driveway and all that he tried to kidnap and rape our neighbor's 11-year-old daughter. So it turns out that the man had broken in through the little girl's bedroom window and tried to get the girl to take off her clothes, and when she screamed, he grabbed her by the hair and started hitting her. Her parents were in the backyard, but her older brother heard what was going on and told their parents to come inside. The little girl's dad tackled the man down and started beating him senseless. Meanwhile, the mother called the police. We live near a police station, so they made it to the house pretty fast. After questioning him, they found out that the man had debated whether he should go after my older sister or the other little girl. He also told the police that he'd seen my sister walking home from school a few times but never got to do anything because she was always surrounded by friends. He made comments about how sexy she looked. He told him that he'd even gone through our mail in hopes of finding out my sister's name. He confessed that he was interested in my sister. After this, both of my sisters were just scared to be at home, even though the guy was in prison. Now both my sisters didn't feel safe in our own home. They were horrified at the thought of some creep thinking in such a disgusting way. A month later, Mom finally asked Dad to see a therapist and found that it helped my two sisters. I'm finally okay with talking about the whole thing. I considered my sisters to be very lucky.
Did you ever have a fear of those guys who would dress up as Santa Claus in the mall or at Christmas parties? Up until the age of about 8. I certainly did think I was 6 or I was 7 years old. When me and my mom were walking through the mall with all the Christmas festivities and decorations up. Festive bands playing Jingle Bells, giant tree in the center of the mall, and of course, a mall Santa sitting in a chair covered by green blankets. There was a small line of kids and parents waiting to sit on Santa's lap, maybe 2 or 3 kids. My mom insisted I sit on his lap normally. Would be the other way around, the kid begging the parent to sit on the lap. She knew how shy I was, but she wasn't anyone by the mall. Santa sighed like one of those people who call the next child up. It was just him when I sat on the stranger's lap, and he grabbed me by the chest and said softly in my ear, "What do you want for Christmas?" I think I said a Game Boy Advance. He left and assured me I would receive one then. For whatever reason, my mom walked up to Santa and said something quietly to him, chuckled in response to whatever she said, and then said, "No problem." My mom told me to wait there by Santa for a few minutes until she came back. To this point, no more kids were waiting to sit on his lap, so his attention was directed at me. He told me to come over and sit on his lap again, somehow obeyed despite my fear of Santa Claus. When I sat on his lap, he pulled me closer to him so that my back was leaning on him. When I thought back on this moment now, it's all the more painful and creepy. He then whispered in my ear that he had a Game Boy Advance outside with his sled, and if I followed him, I would get it right now and wouldn't have to wait until Christmas. My fear suddenly turned to excitement as I believed him. We both stepped off the chair, and I followed him down one of the exit hallways, but halfway through he stopped and told me we should take a bathroom break first. We stepped into the bathroom, and he quickly locked the door. I turned and looked at him as he looked at me, but before anything else could happen, there was a frantic banging at the door. Somebody on the other side was yelling to open up. The Santa opened the door, and a man pulled him out and shoved him. And the man then escorted me back to the center of the mall, asking me where my mom went to watch me as a fake Santa. Casually walked out of the exit door and out of my sight when my mom came back. The man explained everything. I'm pretty sure he was watching the whole time, so he and my mom messed around to see if the mall hired mall Santas for the day. They did not, whoever that was. Just a pervert dressed as Santa to get kids to sit on his lap and possibly wait for a perfect opportunity to snatch one, just like he almost told me. This story took place about 5 years ago on Christmas Eve night. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had just finished placing presents under the tree. I went upstairs to brush up on everything, then came back downstairs to the kitchen to get a glass of water before bed. My son Jake, who was 4 at the time, was standing by the stairs leading to the basement. I asked him what he was doing up so late. He pointed down the stairs and said, "Santa." I picked him up and carried him back into his room. I took a glass of water and went to bed. I woke up around an hour later to find my son running down the hall outside my room side and got out of bed. As I was going down the stairs, I saw Jake by the tree looking at presents, and then he ran past me into the basement stairs again. He pointed down the stairs again. The time I looked down the stairs, my heart dropped as I saw a black figure sitting on the bottom step. I almost screamed, but I somehow held it in. pulled my son quietly away from the basement door, and closer to the front door of the house. I moved my hand away from my son's mouth to reach for the lock and the doorknob. I tried to pull. The door opens as quietly as possible, but it was pointless. The squeaky hinges let out of the usual ear-piercing screeches, and I cringed my mouth and eyes as I did. Suddenly heavy steps were coming from up the basement stairs. I screamed and pushed open the storm door, and practically threw Jake outside. I shut both doors behind us, and we ran to the neighbor's house. I rang the doorbell as fast as possible, probably 30 times before they answered. After that, we went inside and stayed there and waited for the police. Whoever that person was, were gone. Though, as determined after the police conducted a thorough investigation of the house, I ended up lying to Jake, telling him that was Santa Claus. But a few years later he remembered the incident and became a little wiser about what happened.